Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby, acquitted of the charges in said articles.
The end of the U.S. impeachment process. The Senate clears President Trump of any wrongdoing, but can we expect next? Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. It was not a surprise. The U.S. Senate, controlled by Republicans, voted to clear President Donald Trump of the 2 impeachment charges. Trump was charged with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. For more on this, we turn now to CGTN's White House correspondent, Nathan King, who's on Capitol Hill, where the vote took place just a couple of hours ago. Nathan, the end of the impeachment process, but is this going to follow the president during the campaign?
Yeah, I mean, you know, even though he's been acquitted and Republicans are celebrating, he's still the 3rd president to be impeached. Remember, you're impeached by the House, you are removed from office or not, in this case, by the U.S. Senate after a trial. And, you know, it's going to be something that the Democrats can use going through to November, the fact that he's unreliable when it comes to putting either his interests or the country's interests first, and expect them to run with it. But the problem for the Democrats is that this is also a rallying point for the president. We just had a statement out from the White House that basically says this is just something that the Democrats have tried to do even before the president was elected. He can campaign on this sort of, the Democrats are just out to get me, and that will help rally the base as well. I think the one problem for Republicans here is that Mitt Romney, the Republican senator from Utah, voted on the first article, abuse of power, to convict. So the White House can't say this is a purely partisan process. Mitt Romney, of course, ran for president. There's no love lost between him and President Trump, but he gave a powerful speech. He voted with his conscience, and there was quite a few of his Republican colleagues who won't say it publicly, but in different political circumstances might have gone along with it. But also Mitt Romney was safe in the knowledge that there weren't the 67 votes to remove his party's president from power.
Nathan, last night the president was in Congress delivering the State of the Union address. What were the major takeaways from that?
Yeah, it was quite an incredible State of the Union in many ways. I don't remember one quite like it. Of course, it was going to be a sort of campaign rally. You know, it is the year of election, but it was almost a reality TV moment at times. The the presidential Medal of Honor to Rush Limbaugh, reuniting a family with a father who'd been serving Afghanistan in real time, but also crowing about the economy. And some of the fact checkers have been working really hard today because there was some stretching of the truth, to put it mildly, especially when it came to manufacturing jobs and the like. But that's what US President Trump wants to run on, of course, the strength of the economy. He did not mention impeachment, but the atmosphere inside the hall was really quite incredible. This joint session of Congress essentially cut in half, with Republicans sort of doing knee exercises so much, getting up and down and clapping. Democrats essentially sitting still. And, you know, it was distilled into a couple of moments when President Trump tried to shake Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House's hand. Nancy Pelosi tried to do that with Donald Trump. He didn't do that. And then at the end of his speech, she ripped up the speech very slowly so all the cameras could get it, sort of really signifying the division, but also the personal animosity that is Washington right now. And when after the speech she was asked why she ripped it up, this was her answer.
Because it was the courteous thing to do, considering the alternatives.
Well, what she would have done with it otherwise, we won't know. But Republicans have tried to paint out that as a stunt to try and take away from the president's achievements. The party political bickering will get worse and worse as we head towards November. Anna.
Thanks, Nathan. That's Nathan King reporting from the US Congress. Well, to continue our discussion, let's bring in our panel. With us here in the studio, Basima Al-Hussein is the CEO of the Al-Hussein Global Strategies and former White House advisor. Also with us, Art Estopenen. He's the former Chief of Staff for the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the US House of Representatives. Next to him, Song Zhang is the Washington Bureau Chief for the Shanghai Wenhui Daily. And joining us from New York, Nate Lerner is the co-founder and executive director of Build the Wave. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for being with us. Nate Lerner, let me start with you. Before we get to the State of the Union, let's look briefly at developments in the U.S. Senate. This afternoon, the Republican-dominated Senate voted to acquit the president on each of those two impeachment charges. It was expected. We didn't expect the president to be convicted in any way. So at the end of the day, what was this? An exercise in futility? What did it achieve?
Well, that's been a question since the beginning, and rightly so. It's understandable. We knew from day one this was going to happen. We knew it was very, very unlikely that the Senate would do anything but acquit Trump due to the number of Republican votes we needed to receive. That being said, though, the whole purpose behind this is that Congress was doing its job. It was upholding the Constitution. It was holding this president accountable. It was standing up to his crimes, to his corruption, and saying enough is enough, and showing that Donald Trump is not above the law, despite what him and his allies may think. And really, that's what our democracy is about. It's what this country is about. And they had a moral obligation to do so. And what we saw is that even Democrats, there were dozens of them in the House who are in districts that Trump won in 2016, districts where he's popular, districts that are huge swing districts. They still voted to impeach Donald Trump when it was in the House because they wanted to do what was right. What was right for history, what was right for our country, not right for themselves. And we saw the exact same thing with Mitt Romney and Doug Jones today as well.
Art, what did you make of that? The Congress was doing its job, the Democrats in Congress.
Well, unfortunately, as we know, there's no evidence that the president did anything illegal. Having a conversation with a colleague, a president of Ukraine, asking him to please make sure that there's no corruption with these military equipment, knowing that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. So he was doing his job. He didn't ask for money back, or he didn't ask for anything in return. He said, please make sure that this issue of corruption with former Vice President Biden and his son, who's making millions of dollars in Ukraine, is looked into. And so the American people realize that there's nothing illegal happened. The members of the Senate didn't have any evidence of any illegality, so properly he was acquitted.
But this has less to do with the legalities of what he did or did not do and more to do with politics, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a totally political process, and the American people have seen the vengeance, the determination that the Democrats have to try to depose him. He was elected by the American people, and now in November 2020, we will see if the American people sided with him and his leadership, or if they will side with the Democrats.
Basima, here's something that'll probably puzzle a lot of people. The president's approval rating went up to 49% last week. This is after the Mueller investigation, after the impeachment. If we look at the approval rating for President Barack Obama, under whom you served, at the same time in his presidency, he was at 46%. So this president is doing better at the same time. Has this impeachment had little or no effect on the people's view of the president?
I think that the impeachment definitely has an effect on the people's view of the president. I think from the beginning, the Democrats, again, were aware that he would most likely be acquitted in the Senate, but because of the interest of protecting the rule of law, the House felt an obligation to impeach him. And I actually think that the very reason that you cite is part of the reason why Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader herself, was so reticent to start the impeachment process from the beginning. If you remember, she had a lot of pressure from more progressive arms of the House Democratic caucus, and it wasn't until a majority of them were pressuring her to go forward with the impeachment that she actually ended up doing it. We saw with President Clinton when he was impeached, he ended up getting reelected, and it helped his popularity. It helps to kind of mobilize the base. Everybody gets worked up, and so that again is not a surprise. I agree with my counterpart in New York that we have more of a long-term interest in preserving the integrity of the office and checks and balances in the rule of law, whether that be actions that are inappropriate by a Democratic president or a Republican president.
But given the president's approval rating right now, Basima, do you think Democrats would be having second thoughts about this? Regrets, maybe?
I mean, honestly, from the beginning, my friends and I in the Democratic Party always felt that politically it wasn't going to help us, but that unfortunately we had no choice but to move forward with this. And I do disagree with Art because, for example, I, as a former White House appointee, I've gone through the White House ethics training process, and it's very clear that you can't do anything that benefits you politically, campaign-wise, while you're working as your capacity as the federal government employee. So when he was on the phone, he was calling from the White House, calling as President of the United States, not as a political candidate, using government resources,
Right.
and then he essentially elicited opposition research, which is a form of campaign, which is something we pay for. Campaigns pay for opposition research.
All right.
The issue is that he's not a traditional politician. He's a businessman, and that's why the American people voted for him, because they wanted a businessman in charge to help the economy, which he definitely
But
has.
Art, what about the ethical questions that Basima raises?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's not a traditional politician. For him, he was asking him, do me a favor, not as, if not, I'm not going to give you the military supplies, but I need you to look into this. So he didn't mean it as, as a trap or anything. He just meant it as a businessman saying, hey, I hear that this is going on, check it out for me.
Well, I have to say, again, as a former White House appointee who's gone through the entire ethical training process,
I wouldn't have said it.
without
Okay.
having to,
Yeah.
without having to prove his motives or non-motives, you're not basically saying I didn't know or that wasn't my intent isn't an adequate excuse. Like, if I had done something like that, I would have at the very least been fired, if not been arrested. And I want to give one
All right.
more example
Yeah.
of this White House, how egregious their violations are. For example, Kellyanne Conway, in the first year of the Trump administration, was sitting in the White House press briefing room with the official White House press seal behind her, and she said on news in front of everyone, go buy Ivanka Trump's merchandise. I mean, that is so
All right.
blatantly illegal, and
So-
she still works there. She hasn't even been fired. Again, I would
You
have
agree
been
with that, yeah?
fired in a second.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I used to take ethics courses every 6 months as
Yeah.
well in Congress,
Yes.
and we were told what to do and what not to do, but Trump is not a political.
All right, I need to move on. Nate, let me get back to you. I want to turn to the State of the Union Tuesday night here in Washington. The president used the address, as most other presidents do, to sing the praises of his administration. There was plenty of made-for-TV moments, if I could call it that, theatrics, some people call it, when he had all these selected people in the audience that he referred to. What did you make of the speech?
Well, it felt like a Trump rally. I was really disgusted by what I saw and how he's really denigrated the office of the president and reduced it to what we see now, which is really a reality TV show. Giving Rush Limbaugh the Medal of Freedom honor was really the cherry on top. It was just absolutely absurd, some of the claims that he made, and the way he presented himself, and the lies he told about his administration, and the way he simply states something and then like it's the fact when it really isn't. And we see that in his rallies time and time again, where he says, "Oh, manufacturing is skyrocketing, the American economy is doing so great, and we're so secure abroad, and I'm not going to touch Medicare." I'm not, and everything's great with healthcare. When really, and then what's happening behind the scenes is nothing. He's failing on those fronts. He's failing as a president, but he's such a good promoter. He's such a good marketer. He has the Republican base so wrapped around his finger that he can get up there and say whatever he wants. And the American people have lost so much faith in our institutions that they believe him. And it's really a shame that it's come to this point. We're really going to have to do a lot of rebuilding as a country after this. But at the same time, we have to fight as hard as we can to beat him in November, and I think we're in good shape, though.
And another really good example of that
dreaming, my friend.
is when President Trump announced that he was signing America onto this initiative to plant like 1 million trees by whatever year, when President Trump has been the worst president for climate. I mean, he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah.
He's rolled back clean water to like regulations to the point that it was before even the Clean Water Act in the 1960s. So just the stunt, again, the optics of being like, we're planting some trees to act like he helping the environment is just absurd.
Before you go on, Basima, I want to play out some of what the president said yesterday. Let's watch.
Our economy is the best it has ever been. Our military is completely rebuilt, with its power being unmatched anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. Our borders are secure. our families are flourishing, our values are renewed, our pride is restored.
What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think that our pride was ever taken away from us, and we have consistently had the strongest military in the world since probably World War II. Yeah. So it's not exactly that our military has been depleted. Again, I'm not sure, you know, what he is specifically pointing to. It's just a lot of self-platitudes.
All right, Arthur.
So I agree with him that he has helped the economy in returning manufacturing jobs. American companies are leaving Mexico, coming back here, all over the world as well. And our military is
there were
stronger.
a few problems, as Nate pointed out. He said the economy has never been better. That's not true. He said that 7 million new jobs have been created. Not true. In the past, in the biggest, he said,
But is it
history.
6 million?
Well, there were 8 million jobs created in the 36 months before he became president.
But while he has been president, which is what he credits, lowering taxes, taking away all of the regulations that the Obama administration had included, and all of the measures that he has, the economy is much better. And that's why he's improving in the polls, like you said, from the beginning of the program.
But it's not the best it's been in history.
Well, again, he is not a traditional politician.
All right, Song Zhang, you've been waiting patiently for us. Look, this was a speech that wasn't very big on foreign policy.
That's right.
But the president did devote part of his speech to relations with China. Let's listen to what he said.
For decades, China has taken advantage of the United States. Now we have changed that. But at the same time, we have perhaps the best relationship we've ever had with China, including with President Xi.
So, listening to the president there, I mean, he says the relations are the best we've ever had with China. It seems to be a bit of a mixed message from the White House, isn't it? Just a week ago, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was telling us the central threat to the United States is China.
Yeah, I think most of the people in Beijing will agree that our relationship with America is very much complicated. And I totally will agree that it's not best relationship in our history. But I understand President Trump has his very unique kind of view on China. He basically cares only about trade. And Mr. Mike Pompeo and other officials they're basically establishment. So these two perspectives are very much different. I think Trump is having a strategy to include those officials with very much different views in his cabinet. I think he's trying to utilize.
Right, but it's more than just about trade, isn't it? It's about America first, isn't it?
I've got a lot of other issues, military and this intellectual property and many other issues. I think President Trump is utilizing Mr. Mike Pompeo to tell Chinese government, I'm better for you. If you want to do a kind of deal, do it with me. Otherwise, Mr. Mike Pompeo and many other government officials will do more things bad for you.
Is this good cop, bad cop here? Nate, you know, there was quite a fierce debate going on today, Wednesday, the day after, over President Trump's apparent snub of the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and her subsequent tearing up of the speech at the end. We heard some of that from our reporter. Would it be fair to say that this was a situation that needed an adult in the room and there was nobody there?
Well, there was an adult there. There was Nancy Pelosi. She extended her hand to him, which a lot of Democrats would not do. And in fact, she caught a lot of flack online for doing so, for folks saying that you should never reach out to Donald Trump like that, for multiple reasons. And so, you know, she had every right to rip up the speech like that because she was snubbed by the president. She's the Speaker of the House. You know, she's one of the most powerful people in the country. She's elected by the people. And here is Donald Trump completely snubbing her, which is, you know, beyond rude and, you know, completely uncivil.
If I
and so, you know, she had a right to send a message back at him, right back at his reality show. And guess what? It worked because all Twitter was talking about today and all the media has been talking about is how she ripped up the speech and the message that's sent, and it completely distracted from his State of the Union and the message he tried to get across. It even distracted Donald Trump. If you look at his Twitter, he's tweeted more about Nancy Pelosi so far today than he has about his State of the Union, which shows you what's on his mind right now.
The reality is that Speaker Pelosi showed by ripping up the speech that she doesn't really take her job seriously. She has a responsibility to be the leader of the House of Representatives, and by ripping off the speech means that she's not interested in working with President Trump, which is what the Democrats have done.
But the same can be said of the president and his behavior right at the beginning.
Well, the thing is that she initiated this impeachment hoax that without any proof of any legal, that he committed anything illegal, and he's taken it personally. Because in his heart, he wants to help, he is helping America to be a better place, and then you have here the speaker that is not cooperating with him on any of the priorities.
Okay, Basima, go ahead.
Well, first of all, there is a lot of evidence that supported the investigation for impeachment. So to say that it is fabricated is just incorrect. As a Democrat, I actually disagree with Nate on this. I don't think that it was appropriate of Speaker Pelosi to rip the speech up behind President Trump. When I saw it live, I was shocked. And maybe I'm a softie because I worked in the Obama administration, but I always think of Michelle Obama, and she always says, when they go low, we go high. And I just don't think, you know, one of the reasons why I personally don't like Donald Trump is because I think he plays really dirty and he does kind of immature things. And I have so much admiration and respect for Nancy Pelosi. My office used to be across the hall from hers, and I was disappointed to see her do that. I thought she could be cooler. But I can see what Nate is saying. I mean, he makes a point politically, attention-wise, that it's, you know, garnering all this attention today. But again, for the sake of the institution and leadership, I was disappointed.
Yeah, Nate, there was a point made by, I think it was a professor at George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, today in the Hill newspaper, in which he said, look, this is not just about politics. This is about decorum. This is about civility. This is about the traditions of these institutions. And in that respect, Nancy Pelosi failed.
I mean, you could certainly make that argument, but I think at this point in the Trump administration, we have to focus on the one single goal, which is defeating Donald Trump. And Nancy Pelosi's job is to help do that. Her job is to help raise money, to help get the base fired up, to help distract Donald Trump. And as I mentioned, she accomplished that goal. You know, she's taking the heat for this. Yes, history may look down upon this, but at the same time, we're not talking about the talking points in Donald Trump's State of the Union. We're not talking about the lies that he made and projecting those to a wider audience. Instead, we're having this debate, and that was her strategy, I believe. And you know what? The base loved it. We're excited. We're going to come out in record numbers, just like we did in 2018, because we saw what happened when we elected Democrats to the House. They followed through on their promise to hold Donald Trump accountable, and so they know that if they can elect Democrats again, we're going to see it all over in 2020. So you think that
Iowa is a reflection on how excited the Democrats are?
We had record turnout in Iowa. The system was overwhelmed. That's why it was a failure by the Iowa Democratic Party. But you know, it doesn't really matter for 2020.
Let's not go in that direction.
Primary.
Song Jiang, I want to ask you again about the China component of the speech. The president also talked about something that's really dominated the relationship with China over the past 2 years, and that's the trade war.
That's right.
Let's listen to what he said.
I also promised our citizens that I would impose tariffs to confront China's massive theft of America's jobs. Our strategy has worked. Days ago, we signed the groundbreaking new agreement with China that will defend our workers, protect our intellectual property, bring billions and billions of dollars into our treasury, and open vast new markets for products made and grown right here in the USA.
So, Song Jiang, the president's doing a bit of a victory lap there. Does he deserve it?
I think most of the economists here in America will not agree with his trade kind of policy, but I will say his strategy is working. And we have already seen the trade deal, phase one trade deal between US and China. I would say we have a lot of things to do, structural reforms and other things. We can see this coronavirus is happening in China, so the implementation might have to be a little bit postponed. But there are a lot of things to do between US and China on trade.
Basima, would it be fair to say that what we saw last night at the US Congress was the opening salvo in Donald Trump's election campaign?
Definitely. And I will say that I think it was one of the better speeches that he's ever delivered. I noticed he didn't...
As an election campaign speech.
Yeah, sure, as an election campaign speech. I mean, it is normal for presidents to have people in the audience who are beneficiaries of certain policies that they have supported. But, you know, we saw those 3 big surprise moments. I've never seen any other president do that. So we had the Medal of Freedom, the reuniting of the family, and then the scholarship announcement for the young child who, you know, is going to a charter school, and all of those were, you know, live moment announcements. I mean, it reminded me of The Price is Right, or you know, Wheel of Fortune, when they say, "You just won a car." I mean, I was like, oh my God, what am I watching?
And I believe that because President Trump connects with the American people, they will respond accordingly in November 2020. He understands how television works in politics, and even though he's not a traditional politician, he's able to use TV in a very effective way.
Absolutely, and I will say, even before President Trump came along, you know, when I started working in Congress and moved to Washington, D.C., my family asked me, what do you think of Washington? And I would always say, 99% of politics is theater. And this man
I call it the East. I call it the Hollywood of the East.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. So he has, that down.
Doesn't Nate have a point here? I mean, all those things that Besson was talking about, we're not talking about that. The media wasn't talking about it this morning. They were talking about Nancy Pelosi tearing up the speech.
Folks don't like details. They don't like the fact that, you know, he created 7 million jobs, that, you know, that 10 million people are no longer in food stamps, and all these other figures, that he's trying to do a healthcare system that is not a socialist healthcare system, market-based, etc. People don't care about the details per se. They just are happy that the president is helping in the economy. They have better jobs, they have better paying jobs, so on and so forth. And that's what the American people want.
Also, I kind of disagree with Nate. I mean, I think, you know, we are talking about her ripping up the speech today all day, but I would personally rather be fact-checking Donald Trump's speech, pointing out all the lies and why it was that he motivated such anger from the Democrats, as opposed to all this focus on what Pelosi did. I don't know that that's really helpful. I think we should be pointing out how he's hurt the environment, what he's done. Okay, yes, fewer people are on food stamps, but more people are hungry. Is that an accomplishment? I don't think so.
What he's motivating is thousands and thousands of Americans all throughout this country that stand hours and days in line to be able to see him in person. That's what he's motivating.
Nate, very quickly, I've got about 20 seconds. I mean, if we look at the issues facing the United States today, facing the world today, I guess the big issue is climate change. The president didn't mention that at all.
No, he didn't, and that's because he doesn't believe in it. Republicans don't believe in it. The Democrats are the only ones that are actually fighting to solve this problem like the rest of the world is, and it's time for the country to catch up.
Okay, and that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us. Hello everybody, I'm Anand Naidu. If you enjoy the thoughtful, engaged discussions you see on The Heat, you may also want to subscribe to our podcast. It's appropriately titled The Heat. Twice a week we take a deep dive on world headlines, talking to experts, journalists and others. It's a fresh, focused and intimate look at the issues that matter most. Whether it's the Hong Kong riots, the latest Middle East conflict or US politics, the Heat podcast gives the clear context needed to understand both what's going on and why. And what's best, we come to you. Whether you're at home or on the go, you can find the Heat podcast just about anywhere podcasts are found. Just search the Heat CGTN. Have a listen today and subscribe. Thanks.